Hey guys, welcome to my porch for a little pea shelling time. Will has started calling these my meditation peas because it is such a lovely thing to have a task that so busies your hands while your mind is free to roam. I do some of my best thinking and praying, I think, while I'm sitting here on this porch shelling peas. I talked about this recently in a video while shelling peas, talking about like the intentionality of slowing down. Coincidentally, I think I was actually wearing the same dress in that video. Now that I'm remembering the thumbnail, that wasn't intentional. But this is like my favorite dress. And it does make me feel a little like on the prairie, which feels fitting. You know, minus all the tattoos and stuff. So it's been kind of a slow weekend. My skin started to flare up really bad with eczema, and I showed you guys that some and told you about it, shot a video with it. I appreciate all of your concern and your prayers. I'm feeling some improvement doing kind of an anti-inflammatory diet, and that's helping, as well as you know, just really caring for my skin and resting and giving my body recovery time. There's been a lot of rest. The heat and humidity really flares it up, so I've been doing most of my farm time well into the evening because it's still pretty hot in the day. And then the rest of the time I'm doing things like sitting on the porch shelling peas in the shade. And today I thought I would turn the camera on because I haven't talked to you guys the last handful of days and share with you. It's kind of been on my mind. Hey darling, you need me to write? You need help on a sentence?
No, I want you to...
Oh, you want me to read it? Okay.
I want to see if you can check.
I fell down in the race. The gas tank is full. She had a very long dress. Will you help me spell my words? We can add numbers together. That's really good, Ben. You did great. Okay. Okay, good. I want to talk about preparation today. Talked about it some over the course of the last year specifically. And I kind of want to talk about where I am on that and where I would advise people to be. I'm not an expert. I'm just a person who grows food for a family. I pay attention. Like, I do pay attention. And I have certain, I think, fascinations that probably make me think the way that I do. But I just want to kind of share what I've walked through to this point. And I share this. I do not believe in fear as a motivator. And in fact, I have a couple of older videos that I would like to reference that I've done. The first one is called That's Not the Shepherd. That's a devotional video. That just is coming from my standpoint as a Christian and just talking about the difference between being led by faith and being pushed by fear. And I think that's a really important message. I did another video a handful of months ago called The Urgency to Grow Food. And again, kind of going into this feeling and what led us to this point, our early days in homesteading, and how we got to this place, and talking about it being time to grow food. I shared that, and I'll put a link to both of those down below. So I'm putting those out first because a lot of times when you talk about stuff of this topic, it kind of gets pushed out to people who've never seen you before. And if I have something to say about preparation and food growing, I always feel just a real responsibility to like address the fear factor. And that only comes from the fact that I have really struggled with like fear and anxiety in my life. I get to get feedback and interaction from people that live all over the world and that have very different views than I do, which I really appreciate that. I really like to survey everything that is being said, and I still don't even believe all of it. Mostly I focus myself on what's right in front of me, which most days that's enough to get along with. So I feel like I do probably need to give some backstory on my kind of walk in preparedness before I go into the steps that I want to talk about and the boxes that I would encourage everyone to check, especially if they don't know where to begin, in feeling like building security and preparedness for their family. And I'm going to do the Cliff's Notes version of my background. You'll notice I've obviously made multiple faith references in this video. I'm not going to label this as a devotional. I typically do whenever I'm going like deep into like Bible study and like giving, sharing my heart on that. I can't talk about this subject without talking about my faith because they are so intertwined. It would be like talking about my family without talking about my husband. However, I hope that you know, if you are of a different belief system than me, I'm really glad that you're here. Like, I don't need you to see the same thing I do, to see value in you, and I hope that you'll stay. I mean, even within the Christian faith, there's a lot of disagreements, and I think that if we can walk in unity as humanity, that we are all valuable. I mean, for me, humanity's made in the image of God. I mean, if I look at a person and call them invaluable, I'm discounting part of the image of my God. Like, that's insane to me. And so I'm glad you're here. And what I'm saying, I want to be able to speak freely about my experience and my perspective of things. It is my real experience. I won't argue about it because, like, it's my experience. However, I want to share it freely, but I want you to know, like, I hope you can hear me and know that I'm sharing what's mine and glean value from it. So, in 2014, I kind of always had this desire for a farm. Inexplainable. Like, I always wanted a farm. Grew up in town, city girl. When we got our first property, I had never, like, seen a chicken up close other than maybe at the fair. I'd never held one. I had no experience whatsoever in farming. At all. And in 2014, it had just been such an urgent thing to want a farm, want a homestead, want to go back to the land, live simply, all that stuff. And we found our first farm. It was a foreclosure, and we bought it. And I remember it was August 14th. It just stands out to me as a really important day of 2014. And I was sitting on the couch with Jeremiah, and I began to talk to him. And it was one of those times where the words just come up like out of you, like without really kind of bypassing your brain. And you kind of know when you're nowhere, like, I should pay attention to this. And I didn't have any language for that at the time. That was just how I would have described it then. Now I would call that prophetic. I would call it leading. I call it knowing and you're nowhere, just because though that is simple language, it is effective. And I was talking with my husband, Maya, and I started telling him, I think that we should be prepared. I think that we should be preparing food. I think that we should be learning to do things. And it was this urgency. It was this real, like, hey, I know that I've talked about this as if it was like a cool idea and it was a dream life for me, but this feels different. This feels like a real sense of urgency. And he agreed with me. And it was the first time he had ever agreed with me. Y'all, Jeremiah was not really on board. He had kind of been like, yeah, we'll do that someday. But he was not on board for the homesteading thing on the beginning. It was not appealing to him at all. He was a computer guy and a youth pastor. Like, that was it. He was not going to do a homestead. He was going to move to the country with me and let me have my little garden and my little chickens and, happy wife, happy life. But it was not his thing. But basically, there was this switch that got flipped, and part of what really testified to me that, like, the Lord's hand was on it was the fact that Jeremiah's eyes kind of opened to the importance of it. So we started in on our homesteading process. We didn't have any money. It was a pretty uphill battle. Made a lot of mistakes. Did a lot of things, on a shoestring, and we learned a ton. Okay, a whole lot. So that's 2014. And then in 2018, our YouTube channel started to grow. And, like, for the first time in our marriage, we were not, like, on a dime budget. Like, we had we were paying our bills on time. We actually had the capacity to, like, do projects, small projects, but still, it was very different. It was like a massive breakthrough for us to have, started getting this extra income. And that, year kind of unfolded, and the growth of our YouTube channel and us starting to really see that the bigger vision that we had for our farm was possible, because I'd had this desire to like teach people and do a learning center and like really see like a localized effort for growing food, teaching people to grow food, supplies for growing food, like all of that. And I started talking about my learning center and all of that, and as the YouTube channel exploded, it was like, whoa, that's actually possible. Well, in 2019, weirdly, in August 15th, and I remember this because it was the first year that we celebrated my mother-in-law's birthday without her. She died at the end of 2018. I woke up that morning, so this is 5 years after the first kind of word we had gotten in direction on the farm, and it was very early in the morning, and I woke up and I was sitting at the counter, and I journal. I'm a journal. I write my prayers. That is really how I talk to God, and it's incredible because I have records. And I had my journal, and all of a sudden, just this feeling came to me. Just this really intense feeling of, Jessica, don't forget to prepare. And I had to stop and really survey like where I was and what I had been doing. And you know, basically we had started to have some resources, and that year I had gotten maybe a little lax. Like I hadn't been quite as resourceful as I had been out of the past, because in the past it had always been out of base necessity because I just didn't have anything. And it was like, oh, well, maybe I don't have to be so vigilant in saving seeds because I can get new seeds next year. You know, like it was stuff like that that I was letting go. I just wasn't being vigilant. So I talked to Maya about it, and I was like, hey, I really felt this. I really felt like the Lord was, you know, put this on my heart. And we came home in August of 2019 and like buckled down on preparing and getting our farm ready to produce more and making sure that we had the tools that we needed. And so we ended up getting some feeder hogs, getting a bunch of meat chickens and the tools that we needed to process meat chickens. And I ended up buying a lot of jars and like all these different tools and things over the course of the next several months, 6 months or so. What happened for us was at the beginning of COVID in March of 2020, when there were meat limits on everything at the store. We had freezers full of meat. Whenever all of the supplies went into back order, we had them all because we had been buying them over the course of the last 7 or 8 months. And that really taught me something incredible about being sensitive to that still small voice and that slight leading. Because I was like, what if we had just ignored that? You know, like what if we had ignored the leading that said start the YouTube channel? What if we had ignored the leading that said buy the land out in the country? What if we had ignored, you know, the leading that said, hey, I mean it about the homesteading thing, you know? And I remember just being like so thankful and relieved. Now, here's the thing. Anytime I talk about that, people are like, what about all the other people that suffered? One, I'm responsible for how I hear and follow. And two, when I hear and follow, I then make a way for other people to do the same. And I would say that in our experience of homesteading, there's pretty solid fruit of that. And really, like, I learned through that process of hearing that voice that I really don't have to be afraid. I just have to listen. I really don't have to be scared. I don't have to hoard. I don't have to do that. I can be wise. And sometimes wise looks like saving a lot. Sometimes listening looks like giving away. I didn't want to get stuck in that rigid black and white place of fear that I had lived so much of my life in. So any time since that has happened that I have seen things on the news or on other media outlets or on YouTube channels where people are talking about preparation and I feel that fear rise up in me, I remember that little whisper that came on August 15th of 2019 that said, don't forget to prepare. And I remember how unafraid we were when we were doing that. It wasn't because something bad was coming. It was simply because it was time, because we had felt that. During 2020, Yeah, I'm not sharing this publicly. These are very vulnerable things to share. During 2020, I'm a worshiper. I have a piano. It's in my room now. It used to be in the window looking over my garden, but I don't have a good window for it here. It's in my room. And I like to just worship, like on the fly, make stuff up as I go. That's one of the ways that I really just, operate my relationship with the Lord. That's a big part of it. And I remember, like, sitting at my piano and worshiping and praying in the height of COVID. And I mean, we were scared. Like, I was very scared. I remember realizing that what we were walking through would be used for good. Though it was so apparently bad, that what we were walking through would be used for good. And that ultimately, people would benefit in the long run. And I remember realizing, and this is a couple months into COVID, so it's probably like May or so. No, it wasn't. It was actually before Easter. So it was very fresh into COVID. This is like early April, so it was like 4 weeks in. I remember thinking, this is going to be just a massive awakening, and people are really going to move into a sustainable life. And ultimately, it's going to result in people being more cared for, their legacy being more cared for, their body being more cared for, and the earth being more cared for. And I was like, okay, like, this isn't what I chose to live through, but I will live through it with as much grace as I possibly can and wisdom as I possibly can. And since then, I have watched this, huge exodus, so many people moving out of cities, so many people buying land for the first time, starting homesteading for the first time, and I love it. I love seeing that. And through all of this, I mean, from before that whole unfolding to now, I've been in all of these, like, survival groups and prepper groups and homesteading groups. Those things really go hand in hand. And I've watched people go through this process of, like, fear and empowerment and all these different things when it comes to sustainability. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. And I know that's a long backstory, but I do think that it's important because there are a lot of people who are talking about survival and sustainability. A lot of people are, and a lot of them know what they're talking about. But I cannot tell you how many people that I have popped on their little survival show or whatever that's talking about prepping. And their whole plan, I mean, they've never grown a garden in their life. Like, they've never stewarded animals in their life. They're like, oh, well, if crap hits the fan, we're going to have to go back to the land. And I'm like, I'm 10 years in and I'm still learning stuff and making mistakes all the time. And that's why I've been telling you guys all this time, turn your waiting room into a classroom. Like, do not wait until it's time to go back to the land to learn how to do it. Like, if you are like, oh, wow, I'm in a place of emergency, I really need to know how to grow food, and you have not spent what time you had educating yourself and preparing yourself and the skills where you are, like, that's a very bad idea to me. That is just does not make any sense. When I look back on my early years of homesteading, I would have hated to go through that under duress because it was hard enough with Walmart fully stocked. And so that's where turning your waiting room into a classroom really comes from for me, is like, I remember desperately wanting to homestead and thinking that I couldn't do anything, but the truth is that I could. You can. And prepare. Prepare for what? That can get very political. And I don't really care to get very political. To me, you should be prepared. There's a certain measure of preparedness that I think is just wisdom. Period. Like, no matter what. Happy-go-lucky, like, everything's fine. It's wisdom. But right now, when you're seeing headlines that are, like, promising food shortages, and you're seeing all kinds of things going on in the world, wars and, different things, inflation, like all the stuff that we're not even talking about the whispers anymore. We're talking about what's just right out in the open. There's a certain measure of preparedness right now that I think ignoring the necessity of is foolish. So I have a real fascination with history, and I have a specific penchant for like the World War II era. A while ago, a couple years ago, I started reading books, listening to podcasts, watching shows, anything that I could about the World War II era. Obviously, I can't really cover that in any length at all. But there was rationing. There were all of these different things. I mean, people were going hungry. And I am so fascinated with reading about that. I especially love reading stories and books of people who actually just lived off the land and have actually made it through that hard time on sustainability and skills. And the thing that is concerning to me now, you know, I'm 36 and my generation doesn't really know how to do that. Because truly my parents' generation largely doesn't know how to do that. And they say a mother tongue of a language can be lost in just 2 generations. Like the ability to speak a native language from your child to your grandchild, it can be completely lost. And this is like that. Like sustainability and going back to the land and growing food has largely been lost. And now I think, wow, if we were to face a situation again with rationing and really desperately needing to go back to the land, it could be very bad. And that's why, because I do believe in grace and mercy, I see this massive influx of people like me who are teaching, who are writing books and, you know, making videos and sharing their story, and they're sharing the wisdom they have. And sometimes as a content creator in the sphere, I can feel a little bit like I'm just surrounded by noise, you know, like I get on and there's all of these how-tos and all of these different things, and I can feel like, this is so much. But when I really step back and look at it, and I'm like, wow, this is what I prayed for. Like I prayed that this information would go out and that people could be prepared. So just some places to start, because I feel like if I were going to talk about this and not give you a practical place to go, that would be very disheartening. This came up because on a Facebook group regarding prepping today, somebody asked, and they said they'd had a dream, feeling really led to start, and it was like a very clear dream of like, do this now. And she was like, I'm living in town, I have no idea what to do. And I started thinking about it, I'm like, man, what an overwhelming place that must be. And I was like, well, let me think about just simplifying it, what I would say. And this is it. The first thing that I would do for preparedness to secure your home is have some way to purify water. In the place that I am now, of course, I'm 10 years in, and there have been lots of steps along the way. We purposely bought our property because it had 2 ponds on it. We dug a very deep well that we are in the process of getting things working on solar. And we have, you know, some water filtration, just like a small thing, like a Berkey. We have a Berkey water filter. We have backup filters for that. That if it came down to it, I could go down and scoop water out of my pond and put it through that and keep my kids in water. That's obviously like the extreme survival situation. And in all my optimism, I hope that I don't need that. But you know, in the cases of natural disasters and things that can befall a family, I like to have all the bases covered. I like to be prepared all the way down to the worst case scenario. So water filtration, that's something to look into. Storing water when you live in a suburban place, an apartment, obviously there's only so much you can do. If you can get some water stored though, I think that's a good thing to do. And then having some sort of way to catch water. Again, that can be sticky legally in different places, so I cannot make blanket statements about that, but I'll leave that up to you to research and decide. And then having a way to sanitize and purify water is, I would say, the number one thing, because, I mean, you gotta have water. Things can get really rough really quick if you don't have water. The next thing, I would say dry goods, having dry goods. There are calculators out there. If you put how many dry goods do I need to feed my family, that you can put in the number of people you know, the number of calories a day or whatever, and figure that out. I have dry beans. That's something that I've got quite a bit of. You can make dry beans stretch a really long way. Rice lasts for a long time. You can use Mylar bags, as well as food safe buckets. I would suggest Mylar bags. There's recently been a law passed that a lot of places online actually can't sell them anymore. But there still are places you can buy Mylar bags online if you do a search for that. And food grade buckets. You can, I feel like Tractor Supply has food grade buckets. You can ask around. Those, I've watched the price literally go up by 10 times over the course of the last several months online. So I don't necessarily suggest finding those online, but basically if you can get dry goods like rice and beans and put them in a Mylar bag and then put them in a food grade bucket, you can protect them from air, water, and hopefully rodents with the food grade bucket. Another thing with dry goods, flour. I have a certain amount of flour that I have stored, but flour doesn't last a super long time once it's ground. But you can store wheat berries for a very long time. So if you have a way to grind the wheat berries, then you can continue to have flour. I like to have dried sourdough starter. So if you have learned the process of sourdough, I think that's extremely valuable to learn how to do sourdough. You don't have to always do sourdough. I'm not even eating bread right now because I'm doing this anti-inflammatory thing. But if it came down to it, you can make a sourdough loaf with sourdough starter, salt, water, and flour. And that's a pretty dang good resource. So I think if you put learning how to do sourdough down as a skill, dry as starter, so you've always got it on hand, it's dry, it can be reconstituted, and then having some source of flour or wheat berries that can be ground into flour and a way to grind them. My friend Jill from Whispering Willow Farm has a really great sourdough course. If you want to learn how to do sourdough with somebody holding your hand, once you get the hang of it, it's a great way to make food out of very little. Next thing, I'm the biggest champion of the garden that I know. Like, I love the garden inordinately, maybe you could even say. You'll notice that this is number 3 on my list. And I used to have way more confidence than I do now. Now, I will never stop gardening. It will always be something for me. I mean, even just like right now, you guys see me shelling these peas. This was from a 3x6 bed, 4x6 bed, something like that. And this is probably the 8th harvest like this off of those plants. We have at this point harvested gallons of dried peas, just like this. That's a lot of food. And then when you use these as seeds, next year we're planning on planting like an acre of these. This is a staple crop. However, this year I got contaminated soil, which I don't think anybody has any business spraying on the earth. But somehow it ended up in my organic garden. The garden had been my big survival plan. Like, you know what? No matter what, as long as I've got my garden ready to go and I have seeds, I can grow a garden, I can save seeds. And I think I had to consider this year, like, what if you couldn't? You know? I hope that's never the case, but the dry goods got higher on the priority list for me. And canning and preserving and putting things in storage that could just be heated up and used got higher on the priority list for me after my garden got damaged in that way. And that no matter what my skill was and no matter what my preparation was, it was beyond me. And, you know, you can lock down your garden and not bring soil in and all that stuff, but that's not to say that it couldn't be contaminated. So, number 3, have seeds and know how to use them. You can buy all the survival seed vaults if you have never gardened before. Again, I am so glad that my early gardening years, when I made all the mistakes, was when the grocery store was fully stocked. Like, I would have not liked to experience that under pressure. Knowing how to use them. Get some resources. I wrote a book for beginner gardeners. Get that. It's called The First Time Gardener by Jessica Sowards. It's a good book. And have some resources on how to garden printed where you can check them. Start working on your soil right now. Learn how to do things that can fertilize your soil right now. Even if you are growing in a little neighborhood, you can have a worm farm. My friend Natalie at Hey It's a Good Life has a really great worm course. And she talks about how to make tons of fertilizer and worm compost on just a very small footprint. That's something you can do right now. You can start a worm farm if you live in a neighborhood. You can start a worm farm if you live in an apartment on your patio. That's something that gives you security. Because the idea of I'm just going to go back to the land when I need to, it's not realistic. You have to turn your waiting room into a classroom, because right now, if food became an issue, if you had enough dry goods, and it might be silly to have your extra closet in your laundry room full of beans, unless you need them. And then you will be very happy that they're there. And if on top of that you've got worms that are making compost out of your scraps, and you have a handful of garden beds that you can make fresh greens with and fresh vegetables with to go with those beans, you know, that's not so bad off. If you've taken the time to can meat and freeze what meat you can and preserve what you can, you could feed your family. It won't be super fancy, but man, I read all these like World War II books and all these different things, and it's crazy to me because so many people, that whole scenario of World War II just snuck up on people. Because you know what they thought? The entire time they were watching it unfold, they're watching and they were thinking, it won't get that bad. It won't come here. That couldn't come here. And they would say, and it's interesting because I've heard references of stories and people, and they were like, it's the 1940s. This couldn't happen. You know, like, and you hear those things and you think, man, how many people have I heard say that about now? And we just think it couldn't happen to us. And here's the deal, and I want to say this to you because I can't tell you how many times I've been like, am I being silly? Is this silly? Am I being paranoid? Am I being afraid? Like, is this silly to buy another 50-pound bag of beans? This is dumb, right? Like, and I'll go to him and be like, I think I'm just being paranoid. And he was like, Jess, he said, in 3 years, if we haven't needed those things and they're kind of looking like they might start, if those canned goods are coming down to the expiration date, we'll go donate them to the food shelter and the food bank, and we'll buy more at that point. And I'm like, oh. So really the only thing that I have to lose right now, because the things I'm talking about are not terribly expensive. Buying a farm, expensive. Buying a 50-pound bag of beans, currently, you can do that for $25. You could do it for $15 a year ago. But truly, like, consider that. When you're talking yourself out of the wisdom of preparation, why? Like, truly, a little bit here and a little bit there. I understand whenever money is tight, you don't have necessarily the ability to go out and buy all of the latest and the greatest or buy a whole lot at once. But you don't have to buy those $130 buckets of freeze-dried food in order to have food preparation. A 25-pound bag of beans and the knowledge of how to cook it. Do that. So yeah, I'm going all over the place, and this isn't as tidy as I hoped it would be. I don't know how to talk about this tidy because I have a lot of emotion that comes with it. Having seeds, you don't have to have a massive seed collection. You don't have to have super expensive seeds. I think open pollinated seeds are the best thing. People will tell you you have to get heirlooms. You actually don't have to get heirlooms. You have to get open pollinated seeds. There are open pollinated hybrids. And what that means is that you can save the seeds from that plant and get a plant like the parent plant. If it's a true survival situation, save whatever seeds you can out of whatever food you have and try to grow them. Even as tomato from the grocery store, as long as the seeds are mature. Like right now, these peas, I can grow these, or I could cook them. Popcorn. Go to the store and buy dry beans. You can plant those, and they'll grow plants that produce beans. I like to do organic if I'm going to buy stuff from the store. I've got videos about this. I'll put a link that talks about this for 40 minutes, kind of going into all the details of that. But it doesn't have to be fancy. You do not have to spend $300 on survival seeds. Truly, like, go to the soon they'll have seeds at the Dollar Tree. It's probably not time yet. They probably haven't brought in the gardening stuff yet, being the fall, but soon they will. They're 25 cents a pack or 50 cents a pack, and they grow. I grew my garden out of Dollar Tree seeds for a long time. You don't have to buy fancy stuff for survival. If the survival situation arises, you're not going to be like, man, I really wish I had fancier stuff. Like, you're going to be thankful that you have what you have. So knowing how to grow them, kind of having resources in place, have your soil as healthy as you possibly can. Let that be your focus. That is 100% a survival tactic. Having healthy soil, building healthy soil, doing worm farming, doing composting, wherever you are, to whatever scale you can. It matters to do that. The next thing, have first aid. If you have anybody in your house that's on a prescription, if you are able to get any backups of that prescription, I know that's not always possible, but if you can, that's good. I have an asthmatic son, and we try to support his lungs and his systems holistically, but he has an emergency inhaler, and I have extras of that. Just in case, I just want to have the extras of it in case we ever need it. Maybe we won't. I hope not. First aid stuff, bandages, ways to treat wounds, suture kits. These are the kinds of things that you can have, that you can store in the bathroom of a place in town. If you live in the country and you're doing the homesteading thing, top them off. Make sure that they're all there. Having triple antibiotic paste and the ways to handle small things not getting infected. Having filling kits, things that you can treat if you have something going on with your teeth and you don't have access to a dentist. And here's the thing, guys, like I've been really broke before. And so, like, to me, when I'm saying have a filling kit and people are like, I've never thought of that. Like, we used to use filling kits because we couldn't afford to go to the dentist, like it wasn't a survival thing. We had that because, you might need it. If your filling got busted out and you were in pain and you had an issue and you couldn't actually go get it fixed, it's nice to have the option to get yourself out of pain and keep it from getting infected. Hand in hand with that, and really, it's hard for me to say any one of these things is more important than the other. I think they all go hand in hand, but this is the order I would do them. And, actually, it's hard. Is that after seeds? Is it even after food? Maybe not. Just depends on the severity of your situation. In our situation, it's the fourth thing that I would handle. The first aid, and then hand in hand hygiene. Having enough stuff on hand that you can brush your teeth, that you can wash, that you can, keep everything sanitary. Having things like peroxide and rubbing alcohol and staples like that. That's all first aid / hygiene. Having feminine care products. Learning to use feminine care products that are washable or reusable. A lot of you were like, what? But that's the thing. It's very valid. There are lots of things like that. Having those in place is a big part of this. And it's kind of that thing of how long do you need to prepare for it? I can't tell you that. I don't know how many people are in your family. I don't know your situation. But I would say right now, I would not like to have less than 3 to 6 months worth of supplies. But you don't have to buy the top of the line stuff again. You don't have to have fancy, buying some extra tubes of toothpaste and extra floss and things that you can take care of yourself so that you don't end up having issues that need more immediate attention, so you don't need the filling kit as much. Buy the cheap stuff and put it away. And then you've got it, and and if it comes down to it and you don't need it, donate it and re-up it. That's all you have to do, and you're prepared. Like, it's not super daunting. If you write the whole list down and you go to Walmart today and you try to buy it all at once, it's going to be a lot. But if you do a little bit at a time, if you go to places like, this is a great place to go to, like the scratch and knit thing. We have an outlet here in Lexington, South Carolina. It's the Costco outlet, and you can go there and get all kinds of good deals on staples like that, just really cheap. Or you go to the dollar store and you can get these kinds of staples. And I like to use very natural products. I try to when I'm doing my preparation, I try to do things that are natural, but I have some things that are just necessity. The only way that we're going to end up using those is if we absolutely need them, and if we don't need them, I'll donate them. But that's what I can afford to put by, because a lot of those natural products, they do cost a lot more, and I cannot justify spending that much on things that are just going to sit in the cabinet. So that's where I am. One girl's opinion. The next thing, once you got your household covered immediately, this is right up there at the top, your pets. Bear sitting here under my feet. It is my responsibility, if something were crazy, to make sure that he can eat. And so keeping food for your pets and making sure that you have enough to get through a period of time is wise. If you have a farm, that puts you in the position of having to decide what to do. Grain is getting more and more expensive. This was one of our reasons, really size down pigs. We just had another litter born. We're only going to be keeping one of them, because in our experience, it's harder to fatten up a pig without grain, but we did get into grass-fed cattle. We have lots of grass between our house and our neighbor's house, and that was kind of a decision for us. And so you might look at your farm and consider, what would I do if I didn't have access to a feed store? Because again, a lot of people say, I'm going to go live off the land, but then they end up with an astronomical feed bill, and that's not sustainable. It's okay if you have access to it and you don't mind spending it. I think that food that's grown even on conventional grain at home is better for you, and it's better for the earth, but it's not sustainable. And so looking at it and saying, okay, what would I do? How would I cut these numbers down? What could I free range? What could be grown on grass? That is a plan, I would say, that if you've got this stuff, you really need to have. But pet and animal care, if your animals have medications, it's the same kind of thing, having backups of those. The next thing, things like clothing, shoes, socks, underwear, like all of those things. I was actually talking to Jeremiah about this today, and I was like, we have, enough clothes that if we needed to just stop buying clothes, we would probably be okay for a while. We have 5 growing boys. Now, we have the great benefit that they're all boys and they're all stair-step, so they can just mostly grow into each other's clothes for a good long while. Like, if we were not able to keep buying clothes, we have stair-step, so there's the next sizes. The older kids is where it starts to be a problem, and now they're man size. That, I think, is something to consider, but I don't really know what to tell you to do, because I'm not 100% sure what to do myself. What I have been doing is I do have like extra packages of socks, and these are things that, like, for instance, when I go into the Costco outlet and I see a good deal in a size that is usable by my kids, or I think will be usable by my kids in the next year or two, I'll grab those, and I just have a bin in the storage that I just put that kind of extra stuff in, and we don't even open them, and I know we've got backup socks. And the thing is if we were ever in a place that we were in a bind, you're not going to stop needing that stuff. And so being able to just lean into what you already have versus needing to go buy it, it's just good to have backup stuff. Regarding like clothing, shoes, coats, all of that, I don't really know what to tell you to do, but I would say consider it. A sewing kit, that's another thing that I didn't consider for a long time, and I started thinking about the clothing thing. And I have a sewing kit, but I don't do just a ton of sewing, so it's not extensive. And I realized, you know what, I would be in kind of trouble if I didn't have access to a store and our clothes started tearing up and I couldn't get new clothes. I should be able to do something. And you could, just having a basic sewing kit would be a good start. If you wanted to get more extensive in that and getting a machine, consider how you're going to run it. And along those same lines, other staple goods, batteries, things like lighters, flashlights, matches, all of those kinds of things that you might have some at your house, but they're extremely useful. They're pretty affordable. And if you just bought one pack of batteries if you just went and bought, a box of matches one week, and then a few months later you bought another box of matches or whatever, and you're putting all that stuff up, that would be good to have. I also have oil lanterns, not a ton of them. I would say that electricity is probably our weakest point, just because we have had plans of what we were going to do, but we got held up on doing our shop and some different things. So that's something that I can't speak a ton to. I don't know a ton about, and you're also getting into really expensive stuff when you start talking about solar and generators and all of this. But I think considering oil lanterns, maybe some sort of sun oven, or understanding how to cook over fire. I have a lot of cast iron, and so, you know, we've done a good bit of camping, and cooking over fire is something that I'm very familiar with. I don't love it, but I can do it, and that's something that I've kind of kept in mind. If ever I was without power, there is a certain measure that I could handle, but that's something that I'm working on. That's the point that I'm really focusing on right now. Oh, resources, educational resources. And I mentioned earlier having gardening books, but I, for so long, was just completely dependent on the internet. I mean, even, I will just confess to you guys, even right now, if I cannot remember, this is so embarrassing. If I cannot remember my own recipes, I Google them. That's true. I have a blog that's got lots of great recipes on it, and like, they're mine. And I know them, and I've made them a lot of times, but sometimes it's like, do I do a tablespoon or a teaspoon of this? Like, and I'll just Google Roots and Refuge, how to make blah, blah, blah. So goofy. Print them off. I actually have my recipes written down. I usually Google them because my phone's in my pocket and I'm standing at the stove. But print them off, write them down. Even if you're writing stuff down from online, getting books, buy them used. For so long, I had my goats' medicine. You know, how much medicine I would give my goats. I just checked this file on a Facebook group I was in. Well, print it off. Have it written down, because if our knowledge is tied up in the internet, all somebody has to do to disable us is take away the internet. I really didn't plan on doing this video. I don't want you to be afraid. I really don't. And I hope that if you do feel afraid, you'll go watch those other videos and find some peace. And I just pray for peace to come over you, and understand that fear does push you. Wisdom leads you. And what happens a lot of times is you start getting led by wisdom, and you start preparing, and people go, don't be afraid. Wisdom does not mean inactivity. That is not the way to be wise. In fact, I would say wisdom is often a very active activity. However, inside of you is at rest. Inside of you is at peace. And as we make all these preparations, you know, I talk it out with Maya sometimes. I still say, do you think this is crazy? You know, like, is this crazy? And then we have to have this conversation of like, look at everything that has happened so far. Look at all the leading so far. And look at what it led to. This is time to do this. And if we never need it, praise God. But if we do, we'll be in a much better position. And the reason I'm making this in the first place is because so many people are coming to me saying, I'm feeling led to be prepared. I'm feeling like I need to prepare. People all over, people from all walks of life are coming and saying, I'm feeling this urgency. This is one more thing I want to speak to, and then I know this video's long. When I start talking about this, somebody will be like, Jess, I'm so scared. I can't do any of this stuff. Why are you talking about this? If you are in a position that you genuinely cannot provide any of this security for yourself, you cannot do any of the things that I have just talked about, you better get into a community. Like, that is the best thing that I can say to you. Even if you can do this stuff for yourself, community is massively important. Local community, people that can come together, that have skills and preparation. It's my bone to pick with the self-sufficient push and everybody talking about self-sufficiency. We're just not enough alone. And it is going to take communities that you might be the excellent vegetable grower and somebody else is the excellent tanner that knows what to do with animal skins, and somebody else makes soap, and somebody else, you know, has the capacity to teach kids well, knows how to make knives. And you know, there are all of these skills. I certainly do not have all of them on my own. But I have some of them that I've gotten pretty good at, and I feel pretty good about that. But when I look into my community, I see so many skills, and I really feel like the local community, and we get to enjoy this worldwide thing here through the internet, but the local community is really important. And if you are in that position where you're like, well, I don't have a community, I don't have any options, my advice to you was to ask yourself why, and to do something about it. And I know that might be hurtful, and I know that might be oversimplifying a complicated situation, but I have watched so many people dive into the homesteading community over these last few years. People who have left solitary lives, people who have had hurts and wounds in their past, people who felt like they didn't have much to offer, people who had a lot to offer and they were afraid of being taken advantage of. And I've watched them connect into this community, and I do believe that it is very much possible. Kind of intense tone. I hope you don't feel intense. This is a beautiful thing that we can have these conversations, that we can have wisdom, we can share it, that we can have the sensitivity to feel that nudge, like, hey, don't forget to prepare, and that we can then do it. Thank you guys. I bless you. Until next time.